They brought a predator to class. Then the human Deathworlder left aliens speechless. The first day at the Intergalactic Academy was always a spectacle, but today, the corridors buzzed with an unusual mix of excitement and unease. Rumors had spread faster than starlight about a new student arriving from one of the most notorious planets in the Outer Rim. His name was Kale, and he hailed from a Deathworld, a planet so harsh and unforgiving that most species would not survive a single year there, let alone thrive. The alien students whispered to each other, their elongated eyes darting from one end of the hallway to the other. They had seen humans before, of course, but only from diplomatic or commercial delegations. Humans were small, fragile creatures in appearance, with soft skin and no natural armor. Yet every story they had heard painted them as dangerous, unpredictable, and resilient in ways no other species could understand. "Do you think he can handle the curriculum here?" one Zarlokian asked his friend, a sleek, violet-skinned being with 6 limbs. "Handle it?" the friend scoffed, flicking a thin antenna. "I heard he wrestled a sand drake with his bare hands back home. A sand drake? I'd rather face a supernova than that." Kale, however, paid no attention to the whispers. His eyes scanned the corridor, observing not just the other students, but the architecture of the academy itself. Tall, crystalline towers stretched toward the artificial sky, corridors lined with flowing light panels that changed colors with every step. He noted every detail, every exit, every piece of furniture that could serve a tactical purpose. On his Deathworld, awareness was survival. Here, he called it habit. As he entered the classroom for the first time, Kale felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes on him. He didn't flinch. Some species had multiple eyes, others had sensory tendrils, and a few even had telepathic capabilities. Every one of them seemed to be measuring him, predicting him, testing him without a word. Kale smiled faintly to himself. He was used to being underestimated. It had been a daily necessity since childhood. The professor, a massive creature with scales that shimmered like molten metal, addressed the class in a deep, resonant voice. "Today, we will observe a test in adaptability," the professor announced, pacing slowly, "and we will see if our new human is as capable as rumor suggests." Kale's new classmates exchanged glances. Adaptability tests at the academy were usually theoretical exercises, simulations, or problem-solving tasks. But the way the professor's scales glinted in the light, the subtle twitch of his claws, suggested something far more real and far more dangerous. A sudden shiver passed through the room as assistants wheeled in a massive cage. Inside, the creature stirred. It was enormous, with rippling muscles under armored scales, 6 clawed limbs, and eyes that glowed like molten gold. The predator had been brought from a distant sector, a species known for hunting the largest creatures in the galaxy. To most, it was a living nightmare. To Kale, it was an opportunity. The cage doors opened with a hiss and the predator stepped out, sniffing the air. Alien students recoiled instinctively, many of them stepping back to put a wall or desk between themselves and the creature. Some of them hissed warnings at Kale, expecting him to panic as well. He didn't. His eyes never left the predator. The predator took a cautious step forward, its head swiveling, its limbs poised to strike at the slightest movement. Kale noticed its pattern immediately. How it shifted its weight, the way it scanned the environment, the slight hesitation before it lunged. He could see its intelligence, the raw instinct honed over millennia of survival. He respected that. "Observe," the professor commanded, his voice echoing in the large hall. "This is not a mere animal. It is a predator designed to survive by killing. Let us see if our human can endure what no alien could." The aliens snickered nervously, some wagering bets on who would survive the first encounter. Kale remained calm, crouching slightly, hands relaxed but ready. He had trained for this his entire life in far worse situations. Every movement here, every decision could mean life or death, but unlike most of these aliens, he didn't see this as terror. He saw it as a puzzle. The predator lunged suddenly, a blur of claws and teeth. Students screamed and scattered, their reflexes unprepared for such raw, immediate danger. Kale, however, sidestepped, rolling to the side with a precision born of countless survival drills. The air hissed where the predator's claw had just passed. He didn't attack, not yet. Kale studied, waited for the next opening. The predator circled, calculating, and he noticed its favorite stance, the way it relied on its dominant limbs, leaving its flanks slightly exposed. He moved carefully, forcing it to commit to a pattern. A few alien students tried to help him, using energy nets and gadgets. The predator tore through them with frightening ease, scattering the devices and leaving the helpers shrieking and shaking. Kale realized quickly that conventional methods wouldn't work here. The predator was too strong, too fast, and too intelligent to be restrained with alien technology that relied on brute force. He grabbed a long metal rod from the classroom's equipment area, spinning it slowly in his hands. Not as a weapon, but as a tool, a distraction, a lever, a means to manipulate the predator's movements. He nudged a nearby console, causing it to spark and hum. The predator hesitated, distracted by the sudden noise. Kale seized the moment, moving closer to a corner of the room where debris was scattered. With precise timing, he kicked a small pile of objects toward the predator, forcing it to change direction mid-lunge. The creature adjusted, snarling, but Kale had already anticipated its reaction. He ducked under a claw swing, rolled behind a desk, and nudged the predator toward a section of the room with a reinforced cage door. The aliens watched in stunned silence. A human, small, unarmored, had managed to control the predator's path without touching it directly, using only his wits and understanding of movement. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Kale's eyes never left the predator, calculating, predicting. Each movement of the beast became part of a larger pattern he could manipulate. He noticed that its weight shifted slightly when it lunged, that its eyes focused for a fraction of a second before committing. He exploited that, moving deliberately, forcing it into traps of his own design, improvising tools and barriers from whatever was at hand. Minutes stretched like hours, and the room was tense with anticipation. The professor's scales shimmered in a way that suggested surprise, perhaps even admiration. The predator, exhausted from the constant mental and physical challenge, paused. Its breathing was heavy, its claws scraping the floor in frustration. Kale approached slowly, deliberately, not threatening but assertive. The predator's instincts screamed at it to attack, but Kale had shown no fear, no weakness. He extended a hand, not in aggression but in a signal of control. The predator tilted its head, assessing him, and for the first time the beast hesitated, unsure how to respond to a creature so unusual. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the lights and the predator's breathing. Even the other students, previously terrified, could not look away. They had never seen a human move with such precision, such courage, such understanding of life and death in action. Kale didn't need to fight with brute strength. He was faster, smarter, and more adaptable. That was the lesson he lived every day. On his death world, there was no room for hesitation. Every day was a test, every creature a potential threat, every mistake a final one. And yet, he had survived, grown stronger, and learned to read life itself as a puzzle. The predator, sensing no immediate advantage, finally backed down slightly, allowing Kale to guide it toward the reinforced cage. He moved calmly with authority, and the beast followed, almost reluctantly. With one final nudge, the creature was safely contained. A hush fell over the classroom. The professor's voice finally broke the silence. "Remarkable," he said, his tone a mixture of disbelief and respect. This is human ingenuity. You have survived what many of us thought impossible." Kale stood breathing steady, his expression calm. He looked at the alien students, many of whom stared at him with awe and a hint of fear. He offered a small, polite smile. "It's not about strength," he said quietly, almost to himself. "It's about understanding, patience, and not panicking." Whispers spread across the room. The new student from the death world had not only survived the predator, he had controlled it, outsmarted it, and done so without killing it. He had turned a test meant to humiliate him into a demonstration of skill and intelligence. As the class ended, Kale walked out calmly, leaving a trail of stunned silence in his wake. He did not gloat, did not boast. That was not the way of someone who had survived a death world. Confidence was quiet, measured, earned through experience, not words. For the first time, many of the alien students reconsidered what they thought they knew about humans. They had come to see a small, fragile species, but what they had witnessed was something far greater. Kale had survived, adapted, and thrived where others would have failed. And for Kale, the first day at the Intergalactic Academy was just the beginning. There were more tests ahead, more challenges, and more predators to face. But he was ready. After all, a Deathworlder never truly feared the unknown. They learned from it, they adapted, and they survived. The predator might have been brought to class to test him. But Kale, the human, had turned the lesson on its head. and left everyone watching, including the professor, utterly speechless. After the predator was contained, the classroom buzzed with a mix of awe and disbelief. Kale walked calmly down the aisle, his boots clicking against the smooth floor, but his mind was already analyzing what had just happened. He had expected danger, yes, but the way the predator reacted to his moves had taught him something new. Every creature, no matter how fearsome, had a pattern. Every challenge, no matter how deadly, had a solution. That was the rule of survival on a death world, and it applied here as well. The alien students followed him with wide eyes, some trying to hide their curiosity behind thinly veiled expressions of fear. A few who had earlier whispered bets against him now looked guilty, realizing they had misjudged the human completely. Kale didn't notice them. He was thinking about the next step, the real purpose of the day, and the lessons hidden beneath the surface. Outside the classroom, the hallways were still crowded. Students had stopped what they were doing, hovering in small groups to discuss the human who had tamed a predator without a weapon. Some were even replaying the events in their heads, trying to figure out how a species so small and unarmored could succeed where so many others would have failed. Kale reached the common area, where a few professors were quietly observing from a distance. He nodded politely to one of them, a tall creature with translucent skin that shimmered in the light, and then moved toward the exit. He needed air, space, and time to process what had happened. Even the best instincts could use a moment to rest after such a test. A soft voice called out behind him, "Kale!" He turned to see a young alien student, thin and wiry, with eyes like liquid silver. She stepped forward hesitantly. I want to understand. How did you know what to do?" Kale smiled faintly, his eyes calm and steady. "I didn't know," he said simply. "I observed, I waited, I learned its patterns. You don't have to fight a predator to survive it, you just need to understand it first." The silver-eyed student blinked, clearly struggling to grasp the meaning. "You mean you could have killed it?" Kale shook his head. "Killing isn't always the answer. Controlling the situation is better. Survival doesn't require violence, it requires thought." She stared at him for a moment longer, then nodded slowly, as if absorbing a truth she hadn't considered before. Kale left her there and walked toward the open courtyard, where the artificial sky glowed with pale lavender light. Even here, the campus had a sense of danger hidden beneath beauty, sharp corners, unusual gravity fields, and the occasional simulated hazard. It was a place designed to test species like him, and he appreciated it. The professor who had orchestrated the predator test approached him. His scales rippled in colors that Kale could not immediately read, perhaps curiosity, perhaps something deeper. "Kale," the professor said, his voice lower than usual, "you handled that predator with precision. Most of our advanced species would have panicked at best. How did you remain so calm?" Kale shrugged slightly, leaning against a railing. "On my planet, danger is constant. You don't wait to prepare, you adapt instantly. Fear is wasted energy. Observation and timing are what matter." The professor's many eyes studied him for a long moment. "Interesting. I had underestimated humans. I may have to reconsider our curriculum." "Perhaps we can learn something from you instead of simply teaching you." Kale nodded politely. "I hope so. Learning is always mutual, isn't it?" After the exchange, the professor moved away, and Kale turned his attention to the other students. He noticed that their fear had shifted. It was no longer simple terror. It had become curiosity, even admiration in some cases. That was the first real victory. To survive, it wasn't enough to outlast a predator. You had to change how others saw you, too. A small group of alien students cautiously approached him. "Human," one said, his voice trembling slightly, we would like to know how you did that. Can you teach us?" Kale considered them for a moment. On his death world, sharing survival strategies was rare. Only trusted allies received them. But here he recognized something valuable. These students wanted to learn, not dominate. "I can show you some methods," he said finally, "but you must be patient. Observation comes first. Action comes second." The group nodded eagerly, and Kale led them to a quiet area of the courtyard where they could practice simple exercises. He demonstrated movement patterns, how to watch a creature's instincts, and how to use the environment to one's advantage. He didn't need weapons. Everything he showed them was about thinking, timing, and using what was available. By the time they finished, a few other students had gathered to watch. Even those who had mocked him earlier now looked thoughtful, some whispering to each other about human resilience. Kale didn't speak to them. He knew their respect would come on its own. Respect was earned through demonstration, not words. Meanwhile, the predator's cage had been reinforced and relocated to a secure holding area for study. The professors were quietly debating the human's performance. Some suggested adjusting future tests to challenge him further, while others argued that he had already demonstrated something far beyond the normal curriculum. Kale had shifted the expectations of the entire academy in a single encounter. As evening approached, Kale returned to his dormitory. The room was simple, furnished with standard items provided for all new students, but he found it comfortable. He placed his belongings neatly, noting the layout, the exits, and the weak points in the furniture. Old habits died hard, even on a safe campus. While preparing for rest, a notification appeared on his wrist device. It was a message from one of the silver-eyed students from earlier. "Thank you for today. I want to learn more. Can we meet tomorrow?" Kale smiled faintly. This was the first real connection he had made on campus, and he valued it. "Tomorrow, then," he replied silently. The next morning, the academy was alive with energy. Students from all species hurried to their classes, discussing the previous day's events in excited tones. The predator encounter had become the subject of debate, storytelling, and speculation. Every species wanted to know how a fragile human had survived and even controlled a creature designed to kill. Kale entered the classroom quietly, taking a seat near the back. He preferred observation before speaking. The silver-eyed student arrived a few moments later and sat beside him, eyes wide with anticipation. "Today," Kale said quietly, "we will practice observation. Watch everything, predict patterns, and never underestimate what seems simple." Complexity hides in small details. Over the next several hours, Kale guided the students through exercises designed to sharpen their instincts. They studied small robotic drones that simulated predators, analyzed shifting gravity fields, and practiced using environmental elements as tools. Kale moved among them, correcting their mistakes gently and praising moments of clever insight. Some alien students struggled with the human approach. They were used to relying on strength, telepathy, or advanced technology. Kale showed them that sometimes the simplest tools and the clearest observation were more effective than brute force. By midday, even the skeptics were paying attention. The professor who had orchestrated the original Predator test watched from the sidelines. His multiple eyes blinked in fascination. Kale was not just surviving, he was teaching. He was showing the academy a way to think differently, to adapt without relying on superior size, telepathy, or weapons. In the late afternoon, Kale led the students to the practice arena, where a smaller predator had been introduced. Unlike the creature in the previous test, this one was younger and less aggressive, but still dangerous. The students hesitated, but Kale remained calm. "Remember," he said, "do not rush. Watch, wait, and act only when you understand." The exercise began. The younger predator lunged unpredictably, its movements fast and precise. Alien students scrambled, using their usual tactics, but many were ineffective. Kale guided them, pointing out patterns in the predator's behavior, subtle tells in its body language, and ways to manipulate the terrain to their advantage. By the end of the session, the students had successfully maneuvered the predator into a containment zone without harm. They were exhausted, but their faces shone with pride and amazement. They had learned more in one day than they had in weeks of standard training. As they left the arena, the silver-eyed student turned to Kale. "You make it seem simple," she said. "But I can feel how much you think, how much you notice." Kale nodded. "Simple isn't easy, easy is simple. The difference is effort and awareness. Most creatures, most species underestimate either one. That is why they fail." Word of Kale's teachings and the successful predator exercise spread quickly. By the evening, other students were seeking him out, eager to observe, learn, and understand. Kale had become more than a survivor. He had become a teacher, an example of human ingenuity in a universe that often dismissed humans as fragile and insignificant. That night, Kale stood on the balcony of his dormitory, looking out at the glowing artificial sky. He thought about his homeworld, about the harsh conditions that had prepared him for this moment. He understood that surviving the predator was only the beginning. There were greater challenges ahead, but he was ready. He always was. And for the first time, Kale realized that he had not just survived the test. He had changed how an entire academy of advanced species viewed humans. That realization was quiet, subtle, but powerful. The human from a death world had not only lived through danger, he had inspired respect, curiosity, and even awe. The galaxy would take notice sooner or later, the morning sun, or rather the artificial glow of the Academy's simulated sky, bathed the campus in pale gold. Kale walked through the corridors with quiet confidence, his mind already moving ahead, predicting, planning, analyzing. The events of the previous days had made him noticeable, and whispers followed him wherever he went. He ignored them. Observation required focus, not distraction. Today, however, was not a day for casual study. The professors had announced a new exercise, one that promised to challenge the students' adaptability beyond anything they had yet faced. Kale listened as details were revealed. The class would be taken into the outer training sectors, a complex area designed to simulate multiple dangerous environments. Creatures, hazards, and shifting terrain would all be part of the exercise. The alien students exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard rumors about the outer training sectors, places so unpredictable that even experienced cadets struggled to survive a single hour. Many doubted that Kale would face any difficulty, but a few, still skeptical, wondered if even he could navigate such chaos. When the class gathered at the transport platform, Kale's silver-eyed companion arrived beside him. "Do you think we'll survive this?" she asked nervously. Kale studied her for a moment, noting the tension in her posture. "Survival is not about luck," he said calmly. "It's about awareness, timing, and using the environment to your advantage. If you pay attention, you'll make it through." The transport shimmered and hummed as the class entered, carrying them to the outer training sector. When the doors opened, they stepped into a landscape that combined dense forest, rocky terrain, and sudden drops into glowing chasms. Artificial weather systems shifted unpredictably, and the distant sound of predators echoed through the valleys. Immediately, students began reacting in panic. One small, winged alien flitted nervously from tree to tree, clearly overwhelmed by the unpredictable terrain. Another, with multiple legs and sensitive antennae, froze at the first gust of wind. Kale, however, stepped forward calmly, scanning every shadow, every movement, every ripple in the environment. He could see patterns where others only saw chaos. The professor's voice echoed through the sector. "This is a test of adaptability. Observe, plan, and survive. Those who fail will be returned to the academy. Those who succeed will learn something invaluable." Kale led the way, his movements smooth and deliberate. He avoided hazards instinctively. A patch of shifting stone that would collapse under weight, a cluster of thorny vines, a pit camouflaged with glowing moss. Each step was precise, each decision calculated. The alien students behind him struggled to keep pace, some of them already falling behind. As they moved deeper into the sector, a creature emerged from the underbrush, a quadruped with shimmering scales and long, curved horns. It was aggressive, sensing the intruders immediately. Several students froze, unsure how to react, their usual tools proving ineffective. Kale, however, studied the creature, noting its stance, the way it shifted weight before charging, the rhythm of its movements. With a quick glance, he guided a nearby student behind a fallen tree. "Move here," he said softly. "Stay low, stay calm, don't panic." The creature charged. Kale didn't move directly toward it. Instead, he guided the student and a few others to higher ground. The quadruped smashed against the ground below, unable to reach them, frustrated and growling. Kale then led them along a path of narrow ledges and dense undergrowth, slowly steering the creature away from the group without harming it. The students began to notice a pattern in his movements. He wasn't simply avoiding danger. He was controlling it, predicting it, using it to teach them about patience, timing, and strategy. Even the more skeptical students started following his lead, their fear replaced by cautious confidence. Hours passed. The terrain became more unpredictable. Rain fell suddenly, making rocks slippery and streams surge. Strong winds bent the trees, threatening to knock smaller creatures off balance. Predators lurked in the shadows, watching, waiting. Kale's experience on his death world gave him an edge. He could anticipate environmental changes, predict predator behavior, and guide his group safely. At one point, the class encountered a deep chasm, its edges unstable and glowing faintly from the minerals beneath. A student panicked, stepping too close to the edge. Kale reacted instantly, grabbing the student's arm and pulling them back just before the ground crumbled. He scanned the chasm carefully, then found a narrow path across, using natural ledges and fallen trees to create a safe passage. The students followed, silent and focused. Even those who had doubted him earlier began to admire the human's calm, precise approach. Kale's leadership was quiet, almost unassuming, but every decision he made demonstrated intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. As they progressed, the sector introduced another challenge, a group of smaller, fast-moving predators designed to test agility and reflexes. Most of the alien students scattered, attempting to fight or evade with gadgets and weapons. Kale, however, observed their movements, their attacks, and their patterns. He taught the students to stay calm, to read the predator's motions, and to guide them into natural traps without harm. It was slow work, but effective. One by one, the predators were contained or redirected safely. The students began to understand the principles Kale had been demonstrating. Fear was the enemy, observation was the weapon, and patience was strength. By midday, the class reached a plateau overlooking a vast valley. The view was breathtaking, but Kale's mind focused on practicalities. The plateau had limited cover, and the winds could make balance precarious. He assessed the surroundings and began directing students to safer positions, using rocks, low walls, and other natural formations as shields. "Stay aware of your surroundings," he said quietly. "Everything moves, everything changes. If you don't notice, you won't survive." The aliens were amazed. They had relied on power, speed, or psychic abilities in previous training exercises, but Kale showed them that sometimes the most valuable skill was simply paying attention. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell across the plateau. A large predator, much bigger than anything they had faced before, emerged from the valley. Its jaws were wide, its limbs powerful, and it moved with deadly grace. The students froze. Panic rose in waves, threatening to overwhelm them. Kale stepped forward calmly. He studied the predator, noting its size, its approach, its rhythm. He understood that fighting it directly would be suicidal. Instead, he began leading the students through a series of maneuvers designed to confuse and control the creature. They moved strategically, using obstacles, leading the predator away from exposed areas and keeping the group together. Some students began to falter, but Kale stayed close, correcting their mistakes and guiding them with quiet authority. The predator lunged repeatedly, but each time, Kale anticipated its movements, using its momentum against it. The group slowly gained confidence, following his lead rather than succumbing to fear. Finally, after what felt like hours, Kale maneuvered the predator toward a narrow canyon. The creature, too large to pass, stopped and turned, snarling. Kale used the moment to teach the students a final lesson. Sometimes, survival was about patience, sometimes about guiding a threat into a natural limit, and sometimes about understanding when to wait rather than act. The predator retreated, and the group was safe. Exhausted but triumphant, the students looked at Kale with a mixture of respect and awe. They had survived the outer training sector, a place designed to challenge even the most experienced cadets, and they owed their success to a human who had shown them the value of observation, timing, and calm thinking. As they returned to the academy, whispers spread quickly. Kale had not only survived the most dangerous training sector in the academy, but he had also led a group of alien students through it without a single casualty. The professors were impressed, some even reconsidering the curriculum to include lessons inspired by human adaptability. Back in his dormitory that evening, Kale reflected on the day. Each challenge had been a puzzle, each predator a test of intellect and instinct. He had not relied on strength alone, nor on alien technology, nor on luck. He had relied on awareness, patience, and experience, the lessons of a Deathworlder. A message arrived on his wrist device from the silver-eyed student. "You were incredible today. Can you teach me more?" Kale smiled faintly. "Tomorrow," he replied. "We continue learning. Observation and patience are endless skills." He stood on the balcony once more, watching the glowing sky. The academy was vast, full of challenges, and filled with creatures that tested every limit. Kale understood that the predator exercises were only the beginning. There would be greater dangers ahead, tests that would challenge his mind, his instincts, and his leadership. But he was ready, always ready. For Kale, the lesson was simple. The universe was unpredictable, dangerous, and full of challenges. But that was exactly the kind of environment a human Deathworlder thrived in. And as he looked out at the horizon, he knew that not only had he survived, but he had also inspired a new respect for humans. a species small in size, fragile in appearance, but unmatched in resilience, ingenuity, and adaptability. And somewhere in the galaxy, predators and challenges alike would soon learn that a human Deathworlder was not a creature to underestimate. The next morning, the academy was unusually quiet. The events of the outer training sector had spread through the halls like wildfire. Students whispered about the human who had not only survived, but led others through the most dangerous zones without injury. Kale walked through the corridors as if nothing had happened, his expression calm, his mind already thinking ahead. He knew that admiration could be distracting if not managed carefully. Observation, he reminded himself, required focus above all else. Today, the professors had announced a special exercise, a multi-layered survival challenge designed to test not just strength or speed, but intelligence, adaptability, and leadership. Students would enter a complex simulation area filled with unpredictable hazards, mechanical threats, and live predators. Failure was not just possible, it was expected, yet Kale felt no fear. The lessons of his death world had prepared him for environments far harsher than this, where every step could be the difference between life and death. The alien students gathered nervously. Some were still impressed by Kale's previous success, but others were wary, wondering if even he could handle the new scenario. Kale's silver-eyed companion approached him again. "Do you think this will be harder than yesterday?" she asked, trying to hide her anxiety. Kale studied her, noting the tension in her posture and the slight tremble in her antennae. "Harder is relative," he said calmly. "Yesterday we survived, today we learn. Fear makes everything harder, awareness makes everything possible." The transport platform hummed as the class was carried to the simulation area. When the doors opened, they stepped into a dense, labyrinthine zone. Towering rock formations blocked sight lines, streams of glowing liquid snaked through the terrain, and strange mechanical devices hummed softly, ready to spring traps or obstacles at any moment. Even seasoned cadets had struggled in this zone before. Kale moved forward deliberately, scanning every shadow, every movement, and every glimmer of light. He noticed patterns immediately: slight vibrations in the ground, subtle shifts in the mechanical devices, the rhythm of predators hidden behind the rocks. Each observation gave him a small advantage, and he used it to guide the alien students around potential hazards. Within minutes, the first challenge appeared. A group of agile, four-limbed predators emerged from the shadows, moving swiftly and silently. Most of the alien students froze, unsure how to react. They relied on weapons or telepathy in most exercises, but Kale showed them a different path. He guided them slowly, teaching them to move predictively, to anticipate the predator's actions, and to use the environment to their advantage. Fallen trees, rock ledges, and narrow gaps became tools for redirection rather than obstacles. The predators lunged, but Kale had already read their movements. He demonstrated how to maneuver around them without direct confrontation, turning the animals' instincts against themselves. One by one, the predators were guided into containment zones or safely avoided. The alien students began to understand that survival was not always about force. It was about control, prediction, and calm action. The simulation escalated. Streams of glowing liquid began to surge unpredictably, flooding pathways and altering routes. Mechanical traps, designed to ensnare or push students into danger, activated without warning. The students scrambled, many of them panicking, but Kale remained calm. He guided them through the chaos, showing them how to read the environment, predict hazards, and use obstacles to create safe passages. At one point, the group encountered a massive chasm, its edges slick with glowing liquid. A few students froze, their fear threatening to paralyze them. Kale did not hesitate. He assessed the situation quickly and found a natural bridge of rocks, some partially submerged in liquid but stable enough for careful crossing. He moved first, demonstrating the timing and balance needed, then guided each student across in turn. "You must trust your senses," Kale said quietly to them. "Movement, balance, observation. Panic is the only thing that will hurt you." The alien students followed, their fear slowly giving way to concentration. Some of them had been skeptical of Kale's methods, but by now they understood that his calm, deliberate approach was not arrogance, it was experience. He was teaching them to survive by thinking, not by fighting. Deeper into the simulation, the challenges grew more complex. A mechanical predator emerged, programmed to adapt to student movements and anticipate their strategies. Most students tried to outfight it, but Kale remained calm. He studied the machine, noticing patterns in its behavior, a slight delay when turning, a predictable rhythm in its attacks, and vulnerabilities in its design. Use its patterns against it, he instructed. Don't fight it head-on. The students hesitated, unsure, but Kale demonstrated first. He led the machine into a narrow corridor where it could not maneuver effectively. He then guided the students to positions where the mechanical predator could be trapped or redirected without harm. One by one, the students followed his lead, successfully managing the threat. Exhausted but determined, the class moved on to the final challenge, a live predator far larger than any they had encountered before. It emerged from the shadows, its massive form rippling with muscle and armor, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Its approach was deliberate and intelligent. This was a hunter that had learned to strike with precision. The students froze in terror. Even some of the more confident cadets were shaken. Kale stepped forward calmly, analyzing the creature. He noticed its pattern immediately, the way it shifted its weight before a charge, the rhythm of its breathing, the small hesitations in its approach. He guided the students around natural barriers, teaching them how to move strategically and avoid unnecessary risk. The predator lunged repeatedly, but Kale anticipated each move. He used the terrain to control its path, redirecting it away from the group and toward a containment zone designed for such situations. The alien students watched in awe as the human moved with precision, guiding the massive creature without weapons or gadgets, relying only on observation, timing, and understanding. By the end of the exercise, every student had survived without injury. The professors were stunned. Kale had not only survived a challenge designed to overwhelm even the most advanced cadets, but he had also led a group of alien students through it safely, teaching them skills they had never learned before. As they returned to the academy, whispers followed them. The human from the Deathworld had done something no one had thought possible. He had faced danger that would have destroyed most species and emerged not only unscathed but victorious, all while teaching others to survive. Back in his dormitory, Kale reflected on the day. The simulations had been intense, but they were only exercises. The real world, he knew, would be far more unpredictable. Every challenge, every predator, every hazard could be a test of survival. But Kale was ready. He had survived the harshest conditions imaginable, and he had learned to turn fear into advantage. A message arrived from his silver-eyed companion. "You make it look easy. How do you do it?" Kale smiled faintly. "It's not easy," he replied silently. "It's practice, observation, patience. You learn to see patterns in chaos. You learn to move before danger moves. That is all." The next day, the academy held a review of the simulation exercise. Professors and students alike praised Kale's performance. Some suggested incorporating his methods into the standard curriculum. Others debated how a single human could display such skill, adaptability, and calm under pressure. Kale remained quiet, observing the discussions without interruption. Actions, he knew, spoke louder than words. By evening, Kale stood on the balcony of his dormitory looking out at the glowing sky. He thought about the predators, the mechanical hazards, and the chaotic terrain. Every challenge had been a puzzle, every obstacle an opportunity to learn. Humans, he reflected, were small and fragile by most standards, but they were survivors. They adapted, they observed, they learned, and they endured. The alien students had seen it firsthand. They had witnessed a human navigate impossible challenges, control predators without force, and lead a group through chaos without injury. Their respect was not just earned, it was unavoidable. Kale understood that this was only the beginning. The academy was full of challenges, and the universe beyond would be even more demanding. But he welcomed it. Every new test was an opportunity to learn, to survive, and to demonstrate that humans, though underestimated, were extraordinary. That night, Kale lay in his dormitory bed, thinking about the future. He knew that the academy had more surprises in store, more predators to face, more dangers to navigate. But he was ready, always ready. And in the quiet moments before sleep, he smiled, knowing that humans were not just survivors. They were masters of adaptation, capable of turning fear into strength and chaos into opportunity. By the time the lights of the dormitory dimmed, Kale had already begun planning for the next challenge. The professors had tested him, the predators had tested him, and even the alien students had tested him. He had passed every test not by force, but by intelligence, observation, and calm determination. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, predators, hazards, and even other intelligent species would soon learn the same truth. Underestimate a human Deathworlder at your own risk.